My daughter Brenda controlled my life, even isolating me. When she hissed, "You'll do as I say or you'll be alone," I finally had enough. I walked to the landline, dialed, and told the operator, "My name is Clara Henderson and I need help." Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, and if you have any helpful life advice, please share with me and the others. Thank you. The scent of stale potpourri and Brenda's cloying perfume hung heavy in the air of my own living room, suffocating me more than the tight grip she had on my arm. "Mother, honestly, do you have to wear those awful slippers? We have guests," she'd cooed, her smile thin and brittle, her voice just loud enough for Mrs. Gable from next door to hear. Mrs. Gable, bless her oblivious heart, merely offered a sympathetic, fleeting glance before turning back to Brenda's endless monologue about my frailty and declining memory. This had become my life since my husband, Arthur, passed 2 years ago. Brenda, my only child, had moved in to help, transforming my comfortable, vibrant home into a gilded cage. Every decision, from what I ate to what I wore to who I spoke to, was meticulously vetted, controlled, and often outright dictated by her. My phone, once my lifeline to friends and the outside world, was now a decorative item on a high shelf in the kitchen, its ringer permanently silenced, its battery always dead. "Too many scams, Mother," Brenda would declare, shaking her head with a practiced sigh. "I'm protecting you." Protection, she called it. I called it imprisonment. My days unfolded in a monotonous rhythm of Brenda's commands. "Time for your tea, Mother. Don't touch that, Mother, you'll break it. No, Mother, you can't go to your book club today, you're looking a bit peaky." My once lively social calendar, filled with bridge games, garden club meetings, and lunches with dear friends like Alina and Margaret, had dwindled to nothing. Brenda intercepted calls, made excuses, and eventually people simply stopped trying. The isolation was profound, a creeping chill that seeped into my bones. Brenda's constant pronouncements about my supposed infirmity chipped away at my self-worth, making me question my own judgment. Had I really become so useless, so dependent? Was my memory truly failing, or was it just a convenient narrative Brenda spun for others, and eventually for me? A hollow ache settled in my chest, a constant companion to the growing frustration. I missed Arthur, his easy laughter, his quiet strength, his unwavering belief in my capabilities. He would never have allowed this. He would have seen through Brenda's saccharine manipulation in an instant. But Arthur was gone, and I was left alone, seemingly at the mercy of my own daughter's suffocating care. Today, however, a new, sharper edge had been added to Brenda's usual routine. A distant cousin, Harold, had called earlier, a rare breach of Brenda's phone blockade. He had inquired about an old family heirloom, a silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. Brenda, intercepting the call, had dismissed him curtly, claiming I was resting and wouldn't remember. Later, Harold had sent a follow-up email to my ancient, seldom-used email address, which Brenda, thankfully, didn't monitor. He mentioned an upcoming family reunion, urging me to attend. He even dared to suggest I call him directly, offering his number. Brenda saw the opened email on my desktop screen when she came into dust. Her face, usually so composed, tightened into a mask of pure fury. She slammed the laptop shut. "Mother, have you been emailing Harold? I told you he's always trying to get his hands on family heirlooms. He's a snake. And a reunion? You're far too frail for such a long journey. I'm telling him you're not well enough." Her voice, usually cloying, dropped to a low, venomous hiss, a chilling sound that curdled my blood. She leaned in close, her eyes blazing, stripping away the last vestiges of her polite facade. "You'll do as I say, Mother, or you'll be alone, completely alone. You don't have anyone else, do you?" Her words, delivered with icy precision, were a final, brutal blow. The implication was clear: defy her, and she would simply leave me, utterly helpless, cut off from everything and everyone I held dear. For a moment, a wave of terror washed over me, a paralyzing fear of truly being abandoned. But then an unexpected spark ignited within me, a tiny ember of defiance fanned by the sheer audacity of her threat. Alone, she thought she had me trapped, but Brenda had just made her biggest mistake. She had given me a choice. Brenda's cruel words, "You'll do as I say or you'll be alone." Completely alone, echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the living room after she'd stormed off, leaving the scent of her perfume and the chill of her threat hanging in the air. For a fleeting moment, the old fear, the one she had so carefully cultivated over months, threatened to overwhelm me. Alone. It was a terrifying prospect for an 80-year-old woman, especially one whose finances and social connections had been so meticulously pruned away by her own daughter. But that fear quickly morphed into a searing anger, a white-hot indignation that burned away the layers of doubt and helplessness Brenda had so cunningly woven around me. The audacity. To threaten me, in my own home, the home I had worked tirelessly to maintain, the home Arthur and I had filled with a lifetime of love and memories. I looked around the room, at the familiar antique furniture, the faded but cherished photographs on the mantel, the very walls that had witnessed my life unfold. This was my sanctuary, my legacy, and she was attempting to turn it into my prison. My mind, which Brenda constantly declared was slipping, began to race with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. She had pushed too far. The illusion of her care had vanished, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of her control. Her threats were no longer veiled, they were explicit. I was being held hostage, emotionally and financially, by my own daughter. A quiet resolve settled over me, firm as stone. If she wanted me alone, truly alone, then that's exactly what I would be: alone with my thoughts, alone with my plans, free from her suffocating presence. My first step was to find a lifeline. My phone, of course, was out of reach, but Brenda, in her arrogant certainty, had overlooked the old rotary landline in the rarely used den. It was ancient, dusty, but it still worked. It was my only connection to the outside world she hadn't yet severed. I moved slowly, deliberately, not wanting to draw any attention. My knees ached with every step, a sharp protest from decades of life, but a surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. I navigated the familiar hallways, past the closed doors behind which Brenda was undoubtedly making more plans for my future, her future. The den was dim, curtains drawn, filled with forgotten clutter. My fingers, surprisingly steady, reached for the black, heavy receiver. The dial tone hummed a reassuring, albeit antiquated, tune in my ear. But who to call? My friends were gone, their numbers changed, or their patience with Brenda's excuses worn thin. Harold, the distant cousin, was a possibility, but I didn't want to alert Brenda by tying up the landline with a prolonged conversation. Then it hit me: the police. Not for an emergency, not yet, but for advice. They dealt with elder abuse, didn't they? They would know what to do, they would know who to call. My hand trembled as I dialed the non-emergency number, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. Hello. Yes, my name is Clara Henderson, I whispered into the receiver, my voice raspy with emotion but firm with resolve. I need help, my daughter, she's controlling me, she won't let me call anyone. She just told me, you'll do as I say or you'll be alone. I don't know what to do. The kind voice on the other end, a woman named Officer Miller, listened patiently, her calm demeanor a balm to my frayed nerves. She didn't dismiss me, didn't patronize me. Instead, she offered immediate, practical advice, connecting me with a local elder abuse hotline and offering to send an officer for a welfare check. A quiet, discreet visit that Brenda wouldn't suspect. It was a small step, but it felt like the first breath of freedom in years. My journey out of Brenda's cage had just begun. Officer Miller's calm voice, radiating empathy through the crackle of the old landline, was like a cool compress on a fevered brow. She didn't immediately dispatch a siren-blaring cruiser, didn't question my sanity, didn't dismiss me as an overly dramatic elderly woman, as Brenda so often implied. Instead, she listened, truly listened, to the fragmented confession of my isolation, the insidious threads of control my daughter had woven around my life. Mrs. Henderson, she said softly, her voice reassuringly steady, what you're describing sounds very much like elder abuse. Emotional and potentially financial. It's more common than you think. You've done the right thing by calling. My shoulders, which had been hunched with tension for so long, dropped slightly. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't alone. She explained that she couldn't intervene directly without more concrete evidence of physical harm or immediate threat, but she could connect me with resources. She gave me the number for the Safe Haven Senior Advocacy Program, a local nonprofit specializing in elder abuse prevention and support. They have social workers, legal aid, and even counselors who can help you plan an exit strategy if that's what you want, she explained. And if you ever feel in immediate danger or if your access to that phone is cut off, don't hesitate to call 911. She then offered a discreet welfare check, just a routine check-in, Mrs. Henderson. We do them for seniors, make sure everyone's doing okay. Your daughter wouldn't suspect a thing. It would give us a chance to see your living situation, maybe observe her interactions. This was exactly what I needed. A quiet, unobtrusive reconnaissance. The next day, just as Brenda was engrossed in one of her endless phone calls, loudly discussing her stressful caregiving duties with a sympathetic friend, the doorbell rang. Brenda, flustered, answered, expecting a delivery. Instead, Officer Miller stood on my porch, uniformed and professional, clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Just performing a routine community welfare check for seniors in the area. Making sure everything's in order." Brenda's smile froze. Her eyes darted from the officer to me, a flicker of suspicion in their depths. "Oh, a welfare check? Well, Mother is perfectly fine, officer, just resting. We're very careful with her." Officer Miller, however, politely but firmly requested to speak with me alone for a moment, as was standard procedure. Brenda hovered, her jaw tight, but couldn't openly object. In the privacy of the living room, with Brenda pacing impatiently in the kitchen, Officer Miller's gaze swept discreetly over the room, noting the phone on the high shelf, the drawn curtains, the general atmosphere of subdued quiet. "Are you feeling safe, Mrs. Henderson? Do you have access to everything you need? Can you make calls freely?" she asked, her voice low. I met her gaze, a silent plea in my eyes. "Yes, officer," I said, a deliberate hesitation before the word yes. "Brenda takes wonderful care of me, just a little protective." The officer's eyes lingered on my face, reading the nuances in my tone, the slight tremor in my voice. "Understood, Mrs. Henderson. If anything changes, or if you need to speak with me privately, you know my number, or just dial 911. She left a card on the coffee table, face down, so Brenda wouldn't immediately see it. It was a small victory, but it cemented my resolve. I wasn't just imagining things, someone else saw it too. The fight for my freedom had truly begun. The visit from Officer Miller, though seemingly innocuous to Brenda, emboldened me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was the first external validation of my internal turmoil, a confirmation that I wasn't just an aging, confused woman, but a prisoner in my own home. That small business card, discreetly tucked beneath a magazine on the coffee table after Officer Miller left, became my talisman, a tangible link to help. Brenda, of course, had seen nothing amiss, still too consumed by her self-aggrandizing narrative of devoted caregiving. "Honestly, Mother, the things they come up with," she'd scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Welfare checks. As if I'd ever let anything happen to you." She missed the knowing look in my eyes, the flicker of defiance she still believed herself capable of extinguishing. My next step was to contact the Safe Haven Senior Advocacy Program. I waited until Brenda was out for her weekly bridge game, the one social activity she allowed herself, always returning with fresh anecdotes about my sweet, but utterly lost, mother. With trembling fingers, I retrieved Officer Miller's card and dialed the number. A compassionate voice answered, belonging to a social worker named Sarah. Sarah listened patiently, her voice calm and understanding as I recounted the slow, insidious tightening of Brenda's control. The intercepted calls, the withheld mail, the subtle gaslighting about my memory, the financial manipulation disguised as prudent management. "She even took my ATM card, Sarah," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "Says it's for safekeeping so I don't get robbed." Sarah assured me that my experience was sadly common and that they had ways to help. "Our first priority, Clara," Sarah explained, her voice steady and professional, "is your safety and autonomy. We can help you secure your finances, connect you with legal aid to understand your rights, and even provide a temporary safe living situation if you feel you need to leave your home immediately." She then suggested a discreet meeting, perhaps at a local senior center where Brenda wouldn't think to look. "We can pretend it's a new activities program you're trying out," she offered, a touch of gentle humor in her voice. This suggestion sparked an idea. I still had my driver's license, tucked away in my old wallet in a seldom-used dresser drawer, untouched by Brenda's constant tidying. I could still drive, though Brenda insisted I was far too dangerous behind the wheel. The last time I'd suggested driving to the grocery store myself, she'd thrown a tantrum, threatening to call the police for my own safety. But the senior center was only a few miles away. The following Tuesday, I put my plan into action. Brenda had a long doctor's appointment, for herself, of course, always complaining about her caregiver burnout. I retrieved my wallet, my old keys, and my license. The car, a reliable old sedan Arthur had loved, started on the first try. My hands gripped the steering wheel, a sense of exhilaration bubbling up inside me. The drive was short, but each block felt like a mile towards freedom. At the senior center, Sarah was waiting, a warm smile on her face. Over a cup of lukewarm coffee, we talked for nearly 2 hours. I brought out old bank statements I'd secretly kept, receipts Brenda didn't know about, carefully documented notes on her controlling behaviors. Sarah outlined a comprehensive strategy: legal counsel to revoke Brenda's power of attorney, contacting my bank to flag suspicious activity, and most importantly, an escape plan. "We can arrange for a quiet move, Clara," she said, her voice firm. "You deserve to live with dignity and respect, in control of your own life." The road ahead would be difficult, I knew, but for the first time in years, I saw a clear path and I wasn't walking it alone. The meeting with Sarah had filled me with a steely resolve, but also a daunting understanding of the legal and financial complexities that lay ahead. It wasn't just about escaping Brenda's control. It was about reclaiming my entire existence, piece by painstaking piece. Sarah immediately connected me with a legal aid attorney, a kind but sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, specializing in elder law. Eleanor listened intently, taking meticulous notes as I recounted the years of emotional manipulation, the subtle but relentless financial stranglehold, the chilling threat of abandonment. "Clara, what you've described is textbook financial and emotional elder abuse," Eleanor confirmed, her voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. "Brenda has breached her fiduciary duty as your supposed caregiver and possibly committed fraud. We need to act quickly and decisively." Our first step was to revoke Brenda's medical power of attorney and any financial authorizations she might have coerced from me. This was critical. Eleanor explained that while I was still deemed competent, I had the right to appoint new agents or simply to manage my own affairs. "Brenda won't take this well," Eleanor warned, "but legally she has no grounds to object once you've officially revoked her authority. The key is to do it cleanly, with proper documentation." We spent hours drafting new legal documents, meticulously detailing my wishes, making sure my medical directives were crystal clear, ensuring Brenda could not make a single decision regarding my health or finances. I appointed Sarah from Safe Haven as my new medical proxy, and a trusted, independent financial advisor as my temporary power of attorney for banking, giving me time to fully re-establish control. The process felt like slowly untangling a massive, invisible knot that had bound me for years. Each signature on a new document was a small act of rebellion, a quiet reclaiming of my sovereignty. Next came the arduous task of unraveling Brenda's financial manipulations. She had, in her arrogance, left a trail. While she had my ATM card, she hadn't anticipated my meticulous record-keeping. I presented Eleanor with a worn ledger where, for years, I had quietly jotted down my own expenses, payments received, and the dates Brenda handled transactions for me. The discrepancies were stark. Thousands of dollars unaccounted for, payments to unknown vendors, larger than usual withdrawals from my checking account disguised as household expenses. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she reviewed them. "This is compelling, Clara. We'll present this to the bank and potentially to the police." The bank, after some initial resistance, agreed to freeze Brenda's access to my accounts, citing the lawyer's formal request and the documented irregularities. A wave of relief washed over me, a physical lightness in my chest. However, the deepest betrayal lay in the discovery of a significant sum of money missing from my investment portfolio, a sum Brenda had apparently withdrawn shortly after Arthur's passing. It was a substantial amount, enough to significantly impact my future security. She told me it was reinvested in a safer fund, Mother, Brenda had chirped when I'd once timidly inquired. "You know, the market is so volatile." But there was no record of any such reinvestment. Eleanor grimly informed me that this would require a formal complaint to law enforcement and possibly civil action. "This is outright theft, Clara," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, simply stating a fact. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Brenda wasn't just controlling me, she was systematically stealing from me. My own daughter. The image of her cheerful, controlling face now took on a predatory quality, a sinister gleam. The legal maze was daunting, but with Eleanor by my side, I felt a strength I hadn't known I possessed, ready to fight for every penny, for every shred of my stolen dignity. The legal process was a slow, grinding machine, but with Eleanor Vance's expertise, it moved with a quiet, relentless efficiency that began to chip away at Brenda's carefully constructed world. Brenda, oblivious at first, continued her routine of condescending care. She'd return from her bridge games, full of self-pitying anecdotes about her challenging mother, completely unaware that the ground beneath her feet was dissolving. I, meanwhile, continued my clandestine meetings with Eleanor and Sarah, refining my escape plan, gathering more evidence, and most importantly, building up my emotional resilience. Sarah encouraged me to join a support group for elder abuse survivors. And while I was initially hesitant, the shared stories, the quiet nods of understanding, and the raw courage of other women who had suffered similar betrayals by loved ones slowly began to mend the gaping wounds in my spirit. I was not alone. The turning point came when Eleanor, armed with my new legal documents and the damning financial evidence, formally notified Brenda that her powers of attorney had been revoked and that a forensic accounting of my finances was underway. The delivery was made by a polite but unyielding legal courier, a formal, unignorable declaration of war. Brenda's reaction was cataclysmic. Her initial shock quickly transformed into incandescent fury. She burst into my living room, her face contorted, veins throbbing in her neck. "What have you done, Mother? This is insane. You're clearly not well. Who put these ridiculous ideas in your head? Is it those busybodies at the senior center? That pushy Officer Miller?" Her voice rose to a shrill scream, echoing off the walls that had once contained only soft whispers and comfortable silences. "You'll ruin us, you'll ruin me. How could you be so selfish?" I met her gaze, no longer flinching, no longer afraid. The years of her gaslighting, her manipulation, her insidious threats had coalesced into a bitter, unshakable clarity. "I'm reclaiming my life, Brenda," I stated calmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You betrayed my trust, you isolated me, you stole from me." The word stole hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Brenda recoiled as if slapped. "Stole? I managed your money, I protected you. You're just confused, Mother. You're going to end up in a home and it'll be your fault." Her attempts to flip the narrative, to blame me for her own actions, were now transparent, powerless. I simply looked at her, no longer seeing my daughter but the abuser who had held me captive. This was no longer just about money or legal documents. It was about dignity, about survival, about reclaiming my very soul. The following days were a maelstrom of Brenda's escalating rage and desperate attempts to reassert control. She tried to block my access to the landline again, but I had anticipated this, securing a prepaid cell phone Sarah had provided, hidden carefully in a tin box beneath my bed. She would storm into my room, demanding answers, accusing me of mental deterioration, threatening to have me committed for my own good. But the fear had gone, replaced by a cold certainty. I knew my legal team was working diligently. My spirit, though bruised, was unbroken. Brenda's power over me was an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that was now crumbling under the relentless pressure of truth. Each shout, each threat, each desperate plea from her only fueled my resolve. I had endured enough. My freedom, I knew, was within reach. The atmosphere in my home became a suffocating battleground. Brenda, stripped of her legal authority and financial access, raged openly. Her polite veneer completely dissolved, revealing the raw, ugly truth of her resentment and entitlement. "You ungrateful old woman," she'd shriek, her voice echoing through the house. "After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? You'll regret this. You'll be nothing without me." She confiscated my car keys, hoping to trap me, unaware that Eleanor had already made arrangements. She tried to intercept my mail, but the postal service was now alerted. She even started leaving passive-aggressive notes on the refrigerator, a reminder, "Your memory is failing. Don't forget who truly cares for you." But her words, once so potent, now held no power over me. My fear had been transmuted into a quiet, burning indignation. Eleanor and Sarah, my steadfast allies, worked with remarkable speed and discretion. They arranged for a removal company, a small, unassuming one that specialized in discreet moves for vulnerable adults, to empty my house. The plan was meticulously detailed, executed with military precision. While Brenda was out for what she believed was her mandatory therapy session, complaining about her difficult mother, the team would arrive. I packed only the essentials, the most cherished items: Arthur's old worn photo albums, my grandmother's quilt, a small box of letters. Everything else, the furniture, the appliances, the remnants of a life that no longer served me, I left behind. They were just objects, devoid of the emotional weight Brenda had tried to chain me to. The day of the escape arrived cloaked in a soft morning fog, lending an almost surreal quality to the air. My stomach churned with a mixture of terror and exhilarating anticipation. Brenda left at precisely 9 o'clock a.m., her usual dramatic slam of the front door echoing through the quiet house. I gave it 10 minutes, then called Sarah. "She's gone," I whispered, my voice trembling. Within 20 minutes, a plain white van, unmarked, pulled up my driveway. Two kind, quiet men and a woman, Sarah's assistant, moved with efficient speed. They packed my few boxes, loaded them into the van, and then, after a final, lingering look at the house that had been my prison and my sanctuary, I stepped into the passenger seat. As the van pulled away, I glanced back. The house looked exactly as it had, serene and deceptively calm, giving no hint of the seismic shift that had just occurred within its walls. I felt a pang of something akin to sadness, a mourning for the life I thought I had, but it was swiftly replaced by an overwhelming sense of liberation, a joyous, almost dizzying lightness. My new temporary home was a charming, fully furnished apartment provided by the Safe Haven program, tucked away in a quiet, leafy neighborhood across town. It was small, cozy, and most importantly, it was mine. There was no stale perfume, no judgmental glances, no suffocating control. I had a fully charged phone, access to a library card, and the freedom to open my own mail. Brenda, when she returned home to an empty house, must have been utterly bewildered. Her first frantic calls went to the police, then to my friends, then to neighbors, accusing them all of kidnapping. But the police, already informed by Officer Miller and Alina, quickly dismissed her claims, noting my legal right to leave. The fight wasn't over, not entirely. But the first, most crucial battle had been won. I was free. The initial days in my new apartment were a quiet revelation. Each morning, I woke to the peaceful hum of my own thoughts, not the looming dread of Brenda's footsteps outside my door. The silence was not isolating. It was a profound balm, a space for my spirit to heal and expand. I brewed my own coffee, chose my own clothes, and read my own books without comment or permission. Sarah and Alina were my constant anchors, checking in regularly, providing legal updates, and ensuring I had everything I needed. The formal charges against Brenda for financial abuse were proceeding, slow but steady, fueled by Alina's diligent work and my meticulous records. It was a painful necessity, but a necessary one to ensure Brenda couldn't do this to anyone else. One afternoon, I received a call from Alina. "Clara, the bank found more discrepancies. Substantial withdrawals made using a debit card issued in your name, but linked to an account only Brenda had access to, which she used to funnel money from your investments into her own personal spending. We've traced purchases for luxury items, vacations, cosmetic procedures, all while she was telling you your funds were tight." The anger, a simmering ember, flared into a controlled burn. It wasn't just about control. It was about outright theft, about leveraging my trust for her own lavish lifestyle. This knowledge, though painful, solidified my resolve. There would be no turning back, no reconciliation with a daughter who had so cruelly exploited me. I began to rebuild my life, one small, empowering step at a time. I rejoined my old book club, surprising Alina and Margaret, who had feared I was lost to them forever. "Clara, we were so worried," Alina exclaimed, embracing me tightly. "Brenda said you were too ill to leave the house." I simply smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. Brenda was mistaken. I started volunteering at the local library, rediscovering the joy of quiet purpose. I took long walks in the park, feeling the sun on my face, truly alive for the first time in years. The physical freedom was exhilarating, but the emotional freedom was profound. I began to write in a new journal, not just documenting events, but exploring my feelings, untangling the complex web of love, betrayal, and self-discovery. I called it A Life Without Permission. Months later, the legal proceedings concluded. Brenda was ordered to repay a significant portion of the stolen funds, and her actions were formally documented as elder abuse, preventing her from ever holding power of attorney for another vulnerable adult. She was furious, of course, sending me vitriolic voicemails, messages filled with bitter accusations and empty threats. But her words, once so terrifying, now sounded hollow, desperate, and utterly powerless. I simply deleted them, unmoved. The money, though a tangible victory, felt secondary to the restoration of my dignity, the reclamation of my autonomy. My new financial advisor, a compassionate woman named Joan, helped me restructure my portfolio, ensuring my long-term security. The fear of being alone had vanished, replaced by the profound joy of self-sufficiency. I realized that alone wasn't a punishment, it was a choice I had made to embrace my own company, my own strength. I found a wonderful community, forged new friendships, and discovered a vibrant, independent woman I hadn't realized had been buried beneath years of Brenda's control. My journey was far from over, but I was walking it on my own terms, finally free. My days settled into a rhythm of gentle self-discovery and quiet triumph. Each morning, I'd wake with the sunlight streaming through the window of my small, independent apartment, a stark contrast to the perpetually drawn curtains Brenda had enforced in my old home. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee, a luxury I savored without the watchful eye of my daughter. I'd spend an hour in my armchair, sipping from my favorite mug, reading the newspaper from cover to cover, another simple pleasure Brenda had deemed too much strain on your eyes. The legal proceedings against Brenda, while necessary, were a constant reminder of the painful betrayal. Eleanor Vance, my lawyer, kept me informed but shielded me from the more unpleasant details. "She's trying to paint herself as the victim, Clara," Eleanor had explained over the phone one brisk autumn morning, claiming you're mentally unstable, that she was merely managing your affairs for your own good. But the evidence, particularly your financial ledger, is irrefutable. And the forensic accountant found even more irregularities beyond what we initially suspected. Indeed, the financial revelations continued to sting. Brenda had not only siphoned off my investment capital but had also taken out a small loan in my name, using my home as collateral, without my knowledge or consent. This was discovered when Eleanor received a notice from the mortgage company regarding a missed payment. The brazenness of it left me speechless. "She used it to renovate her own kitchen, Clara," Eleanor stated, her voice tight with professional indignation. "New granite countertops, high-end appliances, all on your dime." The image of Brenda preening in her new kitchen, bragging to her friends about her good taste, while I was denied a simple phone call, hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about money, it was about the fundamental violation of my trust and my dignity. However, the legal battles were only one facet of my healing. The support group from Safe Haven became my sanctuary. There, I met women like Evelyn, a spirited former teacher who had been financially exploited by her nephew, and Martha, whose adult children had tried to force her into a nursing home to sell her property. Their stories mirrored mine in painful ways, but also shone with an incredible resilience. We shared advice, listened without judgment, and found strength in our collective experiences. "It's like coming out of a long, dark tunnel," Evelyn had said during one session, her eyes bright with a newfound freedom. "You feel the sun on your face again, and you realize you were never truly lost, just hidden." My renewed connections with old friends were another source of immense joy. Eleanor and Margaret from my book club were ecstatic to have me back. We met for lunch regularly, swapping stories and laughter, catching up on years of missed conversations. "Brenda always said you were too tired or had a bug," Margaret recalled one afternoon, shaking her head. "We worried so much, Clara, we even tried to visit, but Brenda always had an excuse. Said you were sleeping or not up to visitors." A knot of sadness tightened in my chest. So many lost years, so many missed moments. But then a wave of gratitude washed over me. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't given up. I also started to explore new passions. The senior center, which Brenda had disparaged as a place for decrepit old fools, became a hub of activity. I enrolled in a beginner's painting class, discovering a latent talent for watercolors. The vibrant colors on the canvas felt like a metaphor for my life, finally bursting with hues I hadn't allowed myself to see. I joined the center's gardening club, spending hours nurturing fragile seedlings, finding solace and purpose in the gentle rhythm of growth. I even started taking computer classes, eager to bridge the technological gap Brenda had deliberately created. I learned to video call Harold, my distant cousin, laughing as his face appeared on the screen, a little blurry but undeniably there. "Clara, it's wonderful to see you," he boomed, and we chatted for an hour, reminiscing about family history, free from Brenda's watchful eye. My financial advisor, Joan, was a calm, pragmatic presence. She helped me meticulously rebuild my financial life, setting up online banking, explaining investment strategies in clear, understandable terms, and ensuring my security was paramount. "We'll build you a strong foundation, Clara," she assured me, her voice kind but firm. "One that no one can shake." It was empowering to understand my own money, to make my own decisions, to finally feel in control of my future. One particularly poignant moment occurred when I found myself alone in my apartment one evening, the silence profound but no longer lonely. I picked up my new journal, A Life Without Permission, and began to write. I wrote about Arthur, about our life together, about the love that had sustained me even through the darkest times. I wrote about Brenda, not with hatred, but with a complex mix of sorrow, disappointment, and a strange sense of detachment. I recognized her behavior as a sickness, a desperate need for control born perhaps from her own insecurities. But understanding did not mean forgiveness, not yet. It meant setting boundaries, protecting myself, and ensuring she could never again wield such power over me. Then, one crisp spring morning, Brenda's lawyer called Alina to inform her that Brenda had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to repay the stolen funds and acknowledge the elder abuse in exchange for avoiding a harsher sentence. It was a partial victory, not full justice, but a clear legal acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. Alina relayed the news to me. She's been cut off financially, Clara. She's lost her job and she's struggling. She even asked if you'd be willing to forgive her. The word hung in the air, loaded with unspoken history. Forgive, could I? The scars of her control, her emotional manipulation, her outright theft ran deep. I thought of the years of isolation, the whispered threats, the constant belittling. And then I thought of my new life, the laughter with Evelyn and Martha, the vibrant colors on my canvas, the freedom of a walk in the park, the simple joy of opening my own mail. My life was finally mine. And in that moment, I realized that true forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or forgetting the pain. It was about choosing not to let it define my present or control my future. Alina, I said, my voice clear and steady, I appreciate you telling me, but there's nothing for me to forgive. I'm moving forward. I didn't hate Brenda. I simply had no space for her in the joyful, autonomous life I was creating. My focus was on healing, on embracing every new experience, on living a life without permission to its fullest. My journey had been arduous, marked by pain and betrayal, but it had led me to a freedom and strength I never knew I possessed. I was 80 years old and finally, truly alive. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please make sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments.